hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I speak to you in the name of God, who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. I want to share with you this morning some words from Romans, St. Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 10, verses 11 and 13. Paul writes, "The scripture says, no one who believes in him will be put to shame. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." No one who believes in him will be put to shame. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. I want to begin this morning by sharing with you a brief excerpt from what is a much longer story of how I perceived God calling me to ministry within His church. And coincidentally, it is a moment which started out near the sea, as does our gospel reading about Peter and the other disciples on a boat out at sea today. So not long after I returned from university in 2002, I was sitting in my car near the sea, listening to the morning devotions which came on the radio, which was my custom. After I had dropped my older sister off to work, I would go and sit by the sea and listen to morning devotions before I made my way to the office. And as I listened, the reflection for that morning touched on a passage from Hebrews chapter 3 about the necessity of responding to the voice of God when one hears it, rather than hardening our hearts. And I knew almost immediately that in those devotions was a word for me. Yes, perhaps I took that passage out of context, but I believe that God speaks to us sometimes in ways that we will know that it is Him. And I will say that again in a moment. But the reason why this passage struck me in the way that it did on that particular morning was because while I was in university, I had sensed quite strongly during my devotions then that God might have been calling me into a full-time ministry capacity. And as God would have it, it was this very same passage from Hebrews, which I had been reflecting on then, which had now come on the morning devotions on that morning as I sat by the sea. But even though I perceived this call strongly while in university, I took no steps really at that time to act upon that call or even to verbalize it to anyone else. And so, fast forward back to the seaside, dropped my sister off, sitting by the beach, listening to morning devotions. As I left the beach that morning and drove to work, I prayed to God. I said, if you are calling me to full-time ministry, have someone call me today and ask me about the ministry. Dangerous prayer. To make much longer story short, within an hour of arriving at work, the phone rang. It was a friend calling to speak to me about some unconnected matter. And during the course of that conversation, he asked me, "Are you going to the ministry?" And here I am. In today's gospel, Jesus sends the disciples ahead of him in a boat to the other side of the sea, Galilee. They were caught up in a sudden and fierce storm, and we are told that early in the morning Jesus came walking to them on the sea. They were terrified. They thought that it was a ghost, and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus said to them, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And then Peter said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Again, dangerous prayer. If it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And Jesus said to Peter, come. And we are told that Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. So I want us to pause here briefly to reflect on this series of events. One commentator, quoting Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the anti-Nazi Christian pastor and theologian, writes this: Peter does not so much ask for supernatural powers as he asks to recognize that whatever Jesus commands, Jesus makes possible. Whatever Jesus commands, Jesus makes possible. The commands of Jesus, he writes, taken seriously, create miracles. They open an incredible reservoir of divine resources. And he says, apart from such commands, not much unusual is going to happen. In other words, the key moment in these events is not Peter's odd request, not his dangerous prayer to request Jesus to ask him to come to him on the water. But it is Jesus' command to him to come. A command which makes such a request, this miraculous event, possible to begin with. That is, Peter walking on the water. Had Peter not taken Jesus' command seriously, well, he's just kidding, right? Had he not taken Jesus' command seriously, had he not stepped out of the boat in the midst of that storm, his faith and his belief in who Jesus truly was would have been so much more diminished because of it. And so the first point to be made here is that there is necessarily, my brothers and sisters, an embodied component to authentic faith. Faith that is merely words or intellectual assent or agreement or approval about who Jesus is the little faith, I believe, of which Jesus speaks of in the gospel for today. If it's just here, just up here, but not embodied, I believe it is just little faith. But the second point to be made here is that when we act in faith in response to Jesus' command, when our faith is embodied and the miraculous begins to unfold before our very eyes, it is still not even these events in and of themselves which are key, but what these things convey to us about the reality of God, in and with and through whom such things are even a possibility. In other words, it is not about the miraculous healing that occurs in response to the prayers of the faithful. Yes, those prayers are important, but it is not about the miraculous healing that takes place. It is not about the unanticipated career in full-time ministry which unfolds in response to heeding God's call. It is not about the miraculous transformation and the new creation that is brought about in the life of one who truly heeds Jesus' call and follows him. Indeed, it is not about the miraculous fact of Peter walking on the water toward Jesus in response to his command. But rather, it is about what all these things say to us about the reality of the living God in whose presence we live our lives, in whose presence we exist. For the God whom Jesus reveals to us is not just some figment, some idea of our imagination, but the God who has called into existence that which did not exist, and who continues to rule providentially over all creation. And so therefore, even though Peter started to look around and started to take heed of the strong winds and the waves. And he began to sink because of it and had to be caught by Jesus. At the end of the day, both he and the other disciples knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were in the presence of the Son of the living God. I believe firmly that God speaks to us in ways that we will know that it is him, regardless of whether or not we take concrete steps to act in faith in response to what he says, or whether or not we share that sense of conviction with anyone else. And it is not for me or anyone else to say how God does it, but simply to say that we know when it is God who is speaking to us. And his speaking to us, my friends, is always a miracle. It is always a miracle. But yet as Christians, we believe that this is a miracle which humanity cannot even begin to perceive or grasp apart from hearing and responding in faith to the command that God has given us concretely in the very person and work of Jesus Christ. In other words, when it comes to the question of faith, there is a sense in which our obedience in following Jesus takes a certain priority over our understanding this mysterious God who lovingly calls us all. Just like the little children, not like my 2, almost 3-year-old who doesn't come when I call sometimes, but like little children, when their parents say come, we just come. They give us an instruction, we just do it. And it's not until much later that we understand and appreciate what was going on in that way. In the same way, our Lord calls us to follow him. And in so doing, our faith is deepened. We grow, we come to understand this mysterious God who calls us all. In the 10th chapter, the letter to the Romans for today, Paul speaks of the righteousness that comes from faith. And it is important for us to understand that he is not speaking about a kind of self-righteous, works righteousness where deep down we feel that we may either attain salvation or make ourselves worthy of God's salvation through all the good things that we do in obedience to God's word. Those things are important. But we must neither think that we attain nor merit our salvation. But rather the righteousness that comes from faith is just that. A righteousness which is subsequently manifested and embodied within our lives, in our thoughts, in our words, in our deeds, as we say every Sunday, on account of our faith in that prior fact of the salvation we have already received in Jesus Christ. It is a righteousness that comes from knowing that all our lives and the creation itself is within the providential hand of this God who has acted for us and for our salvation. And so I do not do the good things that I do now in the hope that Christ will one day save me. But my friends, I act now. I step out of the boat now and walk on the water now, as it were, in response to the God who has already acted in Jesus Christ to save me. I act now in faith as Joseph did in our Old Testament lesson for this morning. Not on the basis of what I now see around me, or on the basis of the way the odds seem to be stacked against me as they were stacked against him. But instead, in obedience and faithfulness to the God who has sown his commands, who has sown his promises, who has sown wonderful dreams deep within our hearts. So Paul writes to us today, no one who believes in him will be put to shame. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. But yet Paul himself would likely acknowledge that our believing, our truly calling upon this one in whom we have come to believe, depends so fundamentally on the fact of our response to his enduring command, which is to come and follow. Jesus said, "Come, follow me. Come, follow me." So if anything of what I have said here this morning strikes a chord with you, St. Stephen said, let us step out of the boat. Let us go where we have been sent. Let us lead as we ourselves are led, so that our lives, in words, in thought, in deeds, may proclaim our God. Paul says, how beautiful are the feet of those, your feet, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring